Well, NYPD Blue was the best experience of my young life in terms of the show. How did I first start working on it? I think what happened was, as I recall, Mark Tinker had lost a director. A director had fallen out for an episode. And he was looking for a director desperately, and he was speaking to Chris Chulak. I don't think he called Chris Chulak, but he was speaking to Chris Chulak, who was the producer director on ER. And Chris Chulak said, "We've just used this great director, Paris Barclay. I think he'd be great for your show. You should hire him." That's it. And Mark Tinker just hired me. He never looked at my work, as far as I know. He just hired me based on Chris Chulak's say-so. And I was lucky because the first script I got was written by David Simon, and of course David Milch doing his traditional rewrite, although he did very little rewriting then. It was called Upstairs, Downstairs, and it was a fantastic script. It was the fight between the detectives, and I think they suspected a cop, a uniformed cop, had actually been implicated in a murder, and then it became the uniforms versus the detectives, and it was this great, it was just a great story and a great script, and I happened to succeed in doing it, and so then I got hired again. Actually, that was a show that I had been watching since the pilot, and I thought it was one of the most amazing dramas as history has shown in television's history, for the reality of the characters and for the way the storytelling was developed. The sophisticated manner that David Milch told stories in that is unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, I've watched cop shows since Hill Street Blues, since I was a kid, and of course all the other detective shows and the private eye shows like Mannix and the Rockford Files and all the other stuff you watch, but until I guess NYPD Blue, I didn't feel that it was really nailed, that cops were really shown in their whole three-dimensional complexity until that show, including their sexuality, including their prejudices, including the things that really made them tick. David Milch just got it. And he created characters in both the main characters and in the various thugs and perps and creatures of the night that would come into there. He created such completely full characters that the show was really, really alive in a way that was unique. So I always loved the show, and I was really honored to just even do an episode. I thought, if I do an episode of NYPD Blue, I mean, I would have died and gone to heaven. I never expected to be a producer of it. No, actually, it was shot completely differently. I never really got what Greg Hoblet had established as the shooting look of NYPD Blue. He had decided when he did the pilot that it should be shot from one perspective as much as humanly possible. That it's as if you were sitting here and you were watching this action happen. And that's when the camera started to swing around and look at different stuff. That was what that was. It was supposed to be like you looking around a room at different things happening. It wasn't supposed to shift around and become over the shoulder and all that other stuff. Like a standard show, it was supposed to be, my God, you're stuck in the room and this scene is happening, which is what his plan was. Over time, that got softened and became more traditional, but that was his original idea. I didn't really see that as clearly as I did until we shot, and then we just started putting two cameras, as we would say, side by each, and they would start shooting. And when Mark Tinker was directing, he had a microphone, which he would speak directly into the cameraman's ears and tell them what to shoot. Go to the hands, go up, go up, go up, go up, go up to the face, you idiot! He'd say, screaming at the camera people as they were trying to make the shot. And that was part of what gave it its hectic look. Well, it's a complicated question because it was a different process. There was the camera shooting process, which was one thing, but then there was also the rules of NYPD Blue, which was David Milch would come to every rehearsal and he would sort of supervise the rehearsal, in some cases talking to the actors about what he precisely wanted them to do, and some cases acting out precisely what he wanted them to do. And his script was so meticulously thought out that if he said, I want this dialogue in the script, and said he goes from his desk while he's saying this and he enters the coffee room, that dialogue would exactly fit that walk and talk. No more, no less. And you would know that he had meant it, and there wasn't any changing of that. If that's the way he scripted it, that's what he meant. And without him being on the set or hanging out there, I don't think he paced these things out. It was just his mind. This stuff would all work. If he said, I want people to go from downstairs to here, boom, boom, the script and out the door, he wrote exactly enough dialogue for that to happen, and no more. So it was very, very much David Milch's show. And that was interesting because I'd never been on a show that was so dominated by a writer. Fortunately for NYPD Blue, he was brilliant. You know, if he had actually been bad or spiteful, it would be terrible. But because he was brilliant, it made a big difference. He was very late. There was never a script that came on time. But when the script came, it was awesome enough that we were completely blown away by it. Well, with NYPD Blue, David was in control, and you were a co-pilot. So you had to make sure the ship didn't crash, but you were not flying the plane. And you could think you were flying the plane, and you could pretend like you were flying the plane, but you were not flying the plane. It was his vision, and if it ended up not being his vision, you'd be reshooting it. If a cast member that was cast didn't work out, or he didn't feel the performance was right, you'd be doing that scene again, and that was that. And so I learned very quickly that in this particular case, the showrunner, David Milch, is very much the showrunner, and it's your job to be in sync with him. Fortunately, I loved what he did, and I got his style, and I got his characters, that it wasn't bending me out of shape to help create David Milch's world for him.